and welcome to Sounding Board, a community access television production of Seroptimus International of Novato. My name is Madeline Peters, and my guest today is Sara Jones from the Marin County Free Library. But first, just a message about Seroptimus. Seroptimus' mission is improving the lives of women and girls through programs leading to social and economic empowerment. Sara Jones, thank you very much for being here. As I said, I really enjoy when we have a chance to have you on our program and showcase the tremendous activities and services that are now offered through the Marin County Library Services. So why don't I just give you a chance to kind of give our viewing audience a little bit of background on yourself, and then we'll get into our topic, which is focusing on early literacy and your flagship mobile program.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's always a pleasure to talk about library services and always a pleasure to be on this program. So a little bit about me. I've been in library work for about 30 years, which is really hard to, that seems like such a long time, but also seems like such a short time. And I actually started my career in two ways. One was as a youth librarian, so working with children, story times, all the classic things people would think about with a youth or children's librarian. But just prior to that, I was a reading teacher, and I taught in junior high school, and I taught both reading and English. And in both of those places, I really understood how important literacy is, and not just the rudimentary learning to read, which I think is obviously so critical to everyone, but learning to love to read, I think changes everyone's dynamic for how successful they will be. That love of reading is just absolutely essential. So for all the decades of my career, even though I mostly do more management things now than I used to, I just really fundamentally know that if we instill a love of reading with children, we will have a very successful community and world.
Well, thank you. I noticed, just in terms of the Marin County Free Library Services, there are two youth-oriented goals. I can see that your experience in reading, your understanding of the importance of literacy and the importance of building literacy, that love of reading is important as a foundation for children and something that helps them continue and grow in different ways. So the two youth-oriented goals that you have for the Marin County Free Library, and these are on your opening page.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
We talk about them all the time.
Yeah, be the preferred place for children, families, and caregivers to connect, learn, and grow together, and to support youth in our community with opportunities for self-discovery and expression. So, could you kind of then discuss those goals in light of just what you're doing in the area of literacy, or as a lead-in to early literacy services?
Yeah, so I think those two goals are separated in that what we know through research in early times with children from really birth, and good argument that even before, when the child is in vitro, that having exposure to words and literature makes a ton of difference in how quickly their brain develops. And so the first goal really focuses on early literacy and making sure that children from birth until they get ready for school are enriched with words and talking and reading and singing. So a whole lot of things that we do in the library, including the flagship, which stands for Families Learning and Growing Together, is oriented to help parents really understand that they are the child's first teacher, and how the books that they're reading to them and just their own interaction with them makes a huge difference in their development and their success in school. And then the second goal really takes when children are in school, what we want to do is instill that curiosity, that love of learning. And the great part about a public library and all of our services is we're offering little samples of all kinds of things, and a child might get interested in the environment, and then they can read books about that. So we're in the second goal, we're really after instilling the ability to have self-interest and to be able to look for things that interest them, and to grow with that by finding both programs and materials, things online, just to support their own wanting to be a lifelong learner.
Fantastic. Okay. And then So that sort of forms the foundation
It does.
then with your goals. And then how did this get operationalized? What are the range of services towards that really come out or evolve out of these goals?
Sure. So I think when we're talking about early literacy, as I said, we're really talking, as I said, from birth. So that what we want to do is really encourage parents and caregivers. And a lot of times it might be, an actual caregiver that's bringing multiple children because they're in a daycare situation. It might be a grandparent, an aunt or an uncle, an older sibling. But our goal is, from a very young age, is to make sure that there's a rich print environment around that child and a real love of reading and hearing words. And of course, in children's books, there's a lot of rhyming, which is also really good for the brain development and for word development. But one of the programs that we wanted to talk about today is our flagship. And it is actually a vehicle. It's a library on wheels. And we have 2 libraries on wheels. So sometimes people, I need to clarify that. So we have one called a bookmobile, and people probably see that driving all over the county. It's a big white vehicle with our bright logo colors on it, and it says mobile library. Now the flagship is a bright blue vehicle, and it has a beautiful picture of a ship on it, and it stands for Families Learning and Growing Together. And it is my understanding that it started a number of years ago, like a little more than 15, with a statewide First 5 grant. And of course the First 5 community and support is just what I've been talking about, making sure that children from the very earliest times get exposed to words and reading and singing and holding a crayon or a pencil, scissors, all of those things that gets them ready for school, but also gets their brains engaged, which is what's so critically important. So the flagship actually travels all over Marin and is essentially a preschool on wheels. And what we do with that is we go to a variety of different places all over the county, including in Marin City and in the Canal and in West Marin. And we're a place where a lot of families can't afford preschool or even organized daycare. So this gives them that environment. And unlike the bookmobile, it's a print-rich environment, but we let the children and the families take books off the vehicle, and they don't have to bring them back. They can, but they don't have to. So they're walking away with materials that can actually be used and read to not only the child that shows up on the flagship, but to whole families.
It seems as though you've taken your background in literacy, because I understand literacy from the teaching perspective. You've taken those components that you studied, learned, and applied in your teaching career, and then I really see them playing out in terms of the way the services have evolved out of the library services, and having that preschool, having the bookmobile, but also having the preschool on wheels, and just making that part of the community. I think just in terms of its presence there, that signals the importance of building literacy, of reading, and as well as social engagement. So it probably touches on a lot of factors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I know from the long ago background of being a reading teacher and knowing about the importance of literacy is, when I saw children in I mostly taught 7th and 8th grade, and it seems like you really had students in one camp or another. They really usually loved to read or didn't like it at all. And I always have thought that I really think the key to it is engaging in ways that they want to read. And I think so many times that there isn't enough materials for choice, so that they don't get the interest in something that they absolutely love. Because when you put a book in front of a child for something they're deeply interested in, that gives that great motivation to learn to read in the first place, but also to become a better reader. One of the things that focuses on that particular goal too is we partner quite a bit with a number of organizations, but we've been partnering directly with the Marin Housing Authority in Marin City, and they're in a national program called the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And what it's about is just making sure that children are reading at grade level. If children aren't reading at grade level at 3rd grade, then they actually, that's the predictor probably the most significant predictor about whether they will graduate. And then, of course, if they don't graduate, then that's the most significant predictor that they will not be able to have, a successful life and a career and be able to support themselves and their families. So the Campaign for Grade Level Reading has been a great partner with us, and I believe it was October 27th, across the whole nation, they did a project called Read for the Record.
Yes.
And so a book was read across the entire country. And so we read, myself and Louis Jordan, the Housing Authority Director, the Superintendent of Schools for Marin City, Sausalito, and the principal. We all read that book at both the Bayside MLK and at Willow Creek. And one of the things that the campaign knows is, and this is the first time I've heard it called this, that you create a book-rich environment. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's one of the largest disconnects in terms of people with resources, financial resources, and people without financial resources is with them, they will not only visit a library, but they will grow a book-rich environment in their own home. Mm-hmm. And people without so much financial resources, A, might not even know that the library is available for that, and B, are probably just don't have the resources to build the environment where children are always surrounded by books. And what we know is the difference from that not happening to school means that you're starting from behind, right, from the very moment they walk in the door. Right. And sometimes that's such a gap that it's really difficult to overcome.
Well, it's interesting from the school side. You certainly latched onto those predictors. I'm going how much our information kind of comes together, mm-hmm, from our different perspectives and careers. But definitely those factors are really key, and the schools probably approach it from a certain way. But then I think it's extremely important that the Marin County Library Services really understands and recognizes this and does this from a community-based.
Exactly.
And certainly taking into account school personnel, library personnel, and housing personnel, really showcasing or modeling reading is an important message. Yeah. You're reading will happen in the schools. It also happens in the community. And here are these prominent people, exactly, reading. Yeah. So that has an impact as well.
To show people of that level of importance and stature in the community, to sit down, and it was a darling book. I think The Bear Ate Your Sandwich. It's a really sweet book, and it was interesting because when we were doing the promotion, Louis said to the children that we were talking to that he provides, what his job is to help people find houses. And after he said that, I was introduced, and I said, I get to help people find books, which is like, it's a pretty awesome, exciting job to do. But it's, the grade level reading is a very serious subject, and it's just so critically important. And one of the things at the flagship that we wanted to tell viewers about is, as it's been on the road for those nearly 15, 16 years, it's now at the end of its life, and we need to replace that vehicle. So we are actively pursuing raising resources to do that. Mm-hmm. So we have the resources we have 2 people that work on it, and we have the resources to be able to have the materials inside, which are not only books, but we also support things like making sure that children know about brushing their teeth and being healthy and eating well. So we're supporting their, a holistic whole child mm-hmm. environment. But anyway, the flagship, which I believe you'll be seeing some pictures of, it's broken down multiple times. Mm-hmm. It's of an age where it just really, we don't think we have probably more than maybe 12 months left. So we're in the active campaign of finding a way to replace that vehicle, because what we know is preschool and daycare is very expensive in Marin, and many, many families are it's not even possible. So this is a place where they can get that there's absolutely no needed resources from them, but just to look at our schedule and show up. And we try to go in all the places where the families are most concentrated. So we come to them. We don't expect them to get to the library.
One of the things that I was asking, especially was thinking about asking you, is, okay, how I can see you this service then being in the community. How do people in the community become aware of this service? How has that connection happened?
Well, one of the things that's great is this conversation, and I hope that if there's anyone listening and they'd like to know more, we would love to come to service groups or any organization and talk about it. But as far as knowing where the stops are, that's just regularly published. And then the folks that run that program also regularly communicate if people will leave them a phone number or an email address. If that's possible, then we will communicate with them and tell them. Mostly what that's been having to do is tell them when we can't show up because the vehicle is off the road because of being broken down. But we try to be extremely regular. There's a monthly schedule that says we will be, in Marin City at this time. We will be in the Canal at this time. We will be out in West Marin at this time. And the bus stops for a full couple hours and delivers an hour and a half of coordinated preschool activities. So the lady, the Ambra who runs it, likes to say it's a drop in or drop by, not drop in, not drop by, because the parents are deeply involved. So the parents need to sit with the child. They need to learn and grow with the child about what that book-rich environment and those deep literacy skills and how important they are to their child's development.
I can see by this particular approach to providing services in the community, it's not just the opportunity for children to have access to books, but it's building and educating parents as well on their role as the child's first teachers.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is it's not just the program itself for this child,
right,
but building an understanding of the importance of literacy within the family context.
Right. And we know that's a major. I think there's a number of things that happen in economically disadvantaged families. The first one is that they have to work. And sometimes they have to work many, many jobs. So the idea that there's time to, go to story time on, Tuesday at 10 a.m., that can be really difficult. And then I think the other part of that too is that unless they've actually been told that that they don't know they're their child's first teacher, and they often think that they have to, you need to know how to teach someone to read. And of course you don't. You just need to sit with them and love reading and point out things and ask them questions and be deeply engaged. And that's what makes the difference. You don't need to be a full literacy specialist to make sure those kids are ready. You just have to take the time and be engaged and have some resources which we could provide. And I did remember what she meant. It's drop by, not drop off.
Drop by, not drop off.
Yeah, so children are not.
It's not just.
So we want to make sure that it's not a babysitting center service. It's about a real rich family environment. And then what we hope we're doing by modeling that is when they go home, there's a child will say, "Read me a book," and they will say, "Of course I will do that." We also have all these services are delivered bilingually. And I think another important part about the flagship and its services is it's not anyone is welcome. So it's a great way to welcome families that may be worried about a government service and that might put them in some kind of jeopardy. So we make sure that they would never feel that about us. So
they can feel it's a secure.
Yeah, it's completely safe and secure and does not lead into situations that could put them in some kind of jeopardy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you're very conscious of the needs of the community and also very conscious of preserving the unit of the family. I think one of the things that strikes me too is the modeling that you do for the parents and caregivers.
Exactly.
And building, because you're building more than just an understanding of the importance of literacy and how to impart literacy practices. You're building a unit, helping people strengthen their unit.
Right.
How are these programs received? Like, what are the numbers that show up?
Well, the numbers that show up are almost always the bus is completely full. So
wow.
That probably means that if you're really squeezing in parents and children 20 to 25, depending on how much you can squeeze them in. When weather is nice, they can bring it outside and they'll throw like they do every week. They're at the Civic Center by the by the pond, and a lot of times those are large, and if it's nice, they put blankets out and do the services outside of the vehicle. But there are some spots where there's just really a couple of families, and so they would be smaller and a little more intimate for that. The other nice part is that even though we aren't an intake for other kind of services, we're well aware of services. So if we find out that someone's in need of being connected for help with any kind of support, then we try to make those connections and tell them how they could get connected with getting support and where that might be located if they don't have those resources themselves.
So reaching out from the literacy services and then being the center to help these families connect to other services outside of the library.
Yes, for health care or food or a variety of things. Our staff tries to be extremely knowledgeable about providing those services. And one of the things that we do, we've had regular fundraisers. In fact, we just did one on November 1st where we were a local restaurant that let the flagship park there, and then they gave us a piece of the all the net sales that were there that night. So, and then last year we actually, which we will do again this year, is we participated in the human race. And we need to, as I said, we're going to get really serious about raising the money. So I hope people will see us in a lot more places. But we're really happy to bring the details of this project to anyone that would like to listen and hear how they might be able to help some of our, and this is really a reach out that helps the most vulnerable in our community.
So in terms of I know about the story time within the libraries.
Right.
I've participated in them myself. They're absolutely just delightful.
Yeah.
And maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well. But the flagship one is your sort of mobile extension of the library, reaching a lot of families who don't have access to this.
Yeah, and I think that's it is really like that story time on wheels. And in places where the library might not be that close. But story time is a really critically important part of these early literacy services, and we do those in a full range, everything from babies on parents' laps to toddlers. And again, it's we see a really targeted approach of making sure that there's something for every child and every parent as they go through that process. And I think what we know, and I know it from raising children, and I suspect you would too, is that if you start that young, then the child is the one who will say it's Saturday, let's go to the library. So if you make that part of the culture of your family in that environment, then you really will create lifelong lovers of libraries and literature and resources. There's, I'll often ride up in the Civic Center with a whole family, and it's a ritual that they have, and it's, you can tell that it's as much the child saying, Mom and Dad, let's go to the library, as it is the mom and dad saying to the child, let's go to the library. So it's a very targeted and very real approach, and when you read Goal 1, that's what that's about. We want to be the place where it's open and accessible and plentiful. Because books are expensive, even if you have a lot of resources, providing that kind of environment in your own home. And to be honest, there's no way you can reach the resources that we have with literally thousands and thousands of wonderful books to read to your child.
Well, I want to commend you on this library services and the way you've helped shape those services and expand them to the community, meeting an array of needs, people at different ages, and especially hearing about the targeted instruction to kind of promote that early literacy, and both within the libraries and in terms of your mobile lab. We're just kind of about ready to wrap up, but I wanted to give you a chance to think about the different things that are important to you, with the emphasis on the flagship program and early literacy, that you'd like to share. If you have a couple of points that you'd like to articulate for our viewing audience.
Sure. I think that the way I would bring this kind of to a conclusion is that, as we mentioned, the whole literacy issues and grade level reading is critically important. And I think so often we put that burden on teachers and schools kind of exclusively. And we know that that's just a small component. In fact, it's not even the largest component of the time that's available to a child. So I think what I think is the most important thing is the library is just one other place where, as the community needs to wrap its arms around the whole community, but particularly the most vulnerable children, and find ways that we support them. So I think the library is a great place to do that. I'm just a huge commendation for the Housing Authority, who got deeply engaged with this. I don't know that if I mentioned, but one of the things that happened with that Read for the Record is every child who lives in the Housing Authority received that book, and they will get to have it and own it, and we hope to do more of that, of giving them the access to the library, but also creating their own library in their own homes. So I think the point is that it takes a community, it takes a village, and that is completely true. And we need parents to be engaged in care, and we need the schools to do the wonderful work that they do in libraries, and organizations like Sara Optimus and others that really make sure that there's enough resources to get this work done.
Well, you've done a phenomenal job, as usual, of kind of showcasing the Marin County Library Services with a particular focus on early literacy and the program services and heart and soul of the people who are involved in it to engage in the community and connect with other agencies as well. I really want to thank you very much, Sarah, for being here. Anyway, thank you very much to Sara Jones for being here and for discussing the topic of early literacy with a particular emphasis on the flagship program. I'd like to highlight the fact that the flagship is in need of replacement, and so perhaps people who have an interest can contact the library and participate in ways to generate a new ship, a new mobile ship. Thanks very much to Sounding Board crew, which serves as the people who put together the productions, the studio crew, Freda Kaplan and Patricia Hess. Thanks very much to Leon Johnson, our studio engineer. Thanks very much to the Buck Institute for Research on Aging for their generosity in having us film these programs in their television studio. My name is Madeline Peters. My guest today is Sara Jones on early literacy. Thank you very much.